Small business war stories. Small businesses are the soul of America. And this is where they tell their stories. I am your host, Pablo Fuentes. Hey, lovers of small business and good stories in general. Welcome to Small Business War Stories Flash episode with Beate, Chelette. And this week, as a reminder, we're doing shorter episodes. We're doing 4 of them instead of 1. And we are talking to different leaders in the small business community. And today I got to sit down with Beate and we had a really interesting conversation. It's not what I thought would happen. I thought we were going to talk more about specific advice for small businesses. But we ended up talking about how men and women relate in the workplace and how we can grow together and learn more about how to basically take the best aspects of men and the best aspects of women and learn how to work together in different environments to be successful. It's a really fascinating podcast. It's a really fascinating conversation. Again, I did not expect this to go the way it did. But I'm really, really glad that Beate and I had this conversation. And she is extraordinarily successful, has lots of good insights for women and men alike. This Small Business War Stories Flash episode is brought to you by Proven. Proven.com, that's a company I started, and it's a small business hiring tool. So go check it out. If you need to hire people for your company, you have to go check out Proven and use the tool because it works very well. We have thousands of customers. And you can organize all of your hiring. It's very easy to do. Check it out, proven.com. Without further ado, let's get into today's episode with Beate, Chelette, and Small Business War Stories. And we are live here today. And today on the show, I have a very special guest. And her name is Beate Chelette. I didn't say that correctly. Can you help my pronunciation again?
You are actually absolutely perfect.
That was really okay. Wow. I guess I was being self-conscious about it. But in any case, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, and I found you. You have a fascinating background. I found you because you're the leader of the Entrepreneur and Small Business Forum on LinkedIn, which has about 50,000 members and people who are interested in topics related to small business, right?
Absolutely, and I think we are just a couple hundred members away from 50,000. So I'm sweating bullets. What should I do with a 50,000th member?
Yeah, you should throw a party.
Something like that, right?
I should probably leave the group and then wait and every morning log in and then wait to be the 50,000 members, see what happens.
That would be hilarious. I'd like that.
That's awesome. But you have a really, really interesting background, and I'd love to talk a little bit more about some of the things that you've done. Especially, you've done a lot to help women entrepreneurs. Is that right?
Absolutely, yeah. There are 2 things that really excite me. One is entrepreneurship, and the other one is women leadership. And in my ideal world, I get to combine both of them.
Okay, very cool. So tell me more. What are some of the things you've been involved in that front?
So, for example, I do run a training company, and under the umbrella of the Growth Architect, I provide entrepreneur skills training. So I do consulting, and I do courses and one-on-one training with a lot of women entrepreneurs. I do have men that I work with as well. But it seems to be increasingly women lately. And then on the corporate side, I develop outreach programs or programs for companies that want to have a better sponsorship idea, how to reach more entrepreneurs. And I, try to develop sort of this add-on component on what can we do to make their sponsorship dollars really pop while providing more than just a printed name on a program, but actually a benefit for everybody. And in organizations, I also provide balanced leadership training, which is where I help women to step into leadership positions and men and women to get along because there's a lot of hostility right now.
Okay, yeah, that's really interesting. And how do you think when you think about maybe the unique challenges that women entrepreneurs face? What are some of the things that you see?
Well, I think that there's so many, but it really begins with, number one, women are not taught from the get-go to really talk about what we're good at. We always taught to be seen but not heard, to be polite, to not talk back, to do all the things that sort of in the old-fashioned woman way are appropriate. But in business, they're really not appropriate, because in business, you have to figure out how to present your super skill in such a way that you can, stand par to par with men. Another thing I find is women struggle with a lot is to really assert themselves in relationship to men. And I found, that men will take a 2x4 and they just hit you really hard just because they have nothing else to do. And they just do because they figure out they can take out the competition. And if it's a woman, it's an easy hit. Bam, there she's gone. So you have to learn as a woman entrepreneur, really push back hard and do one swift, much harder hit with a 2x4. And then, men will respect you. I also find that women have tremendous issues with self-confidence and with guilt. And the self-confidence, again, comes from not being taught or being told how unbelievably brilliant women are, or that we are just as good, if not better, than men. And that results in sort of this imposter syndrome of, do I have a right to be here, even though if their idea is absolutely brilliant. And the guilt comes a lot from working moms, because we are told that we need to be really good moms, and we need to be there for our children, and we need to be patient and loving, and we need to have all these like super mom attributes. But when we have to work, or when we choose to work, and oftentimes it's a combination out of both, then we feel always guilty that we are either not good enough at work, or we're not good enough as moms. So women run around constantly like feeling inferior, and I want to eradicate that.
That makes sense. So what you're saying is that a lot of times the solution to women being successful in business comes from the way that they perceive themselves and how they can see their own potential and express that.
Absolutely. And there has to be, and I don't want to use the word authenticity, because then we'll all vomit, because it's been overused so much. But I think there has to be this strength really that comes from within you, where you have to be able to give yourself a pep talk and acknowledge that you have a right to be here. I actually just spoke at a Nifty event. I keynoted their competition here on the West Coast. And Nifty is the network for entrepreneurial training, bringing entrepreneurial training into high schools and middle schools. And I said to, the students and their middle and high school students in the room, I said, if you're here in this room, you already have a right to be here. So don't feel bad. You're like right here. You're standing next to me. So you have a right to be here. And I think that to women is one of my big messages. You have a right to be here just as much as anybody else.
So sort of like self-validation, that nobody else has to give you the approval to be you.
Absolutely. And I don't know why that is so difficult. And yes, it's difficult for men as well, but it is 10 times more difficult for women.
Yeah, so that's interesting. So how do we think, it's interesting because some of the things you just mentioned, that like in some ways, consciously or subconsciously, place men and women in opposition. How do you think about a world in which men and women can, obviously there's competition in business and all that, but also collaborate and work together? Because ultimately I think that's much more productive.
Well, I'm so glad you asked, because I have like a really big idea about that, and that is what is covered under the Women's Code, which is, a movement that I created to really bring this balanced leadership and explain what that is to the world. So the idea is that we are in a man's world. Men have built it. It had to work for men. It had to only work for men, and it was only necessary for men to operate in it. And then we decided, because men are courageous and curious and confident, that they were going to allow women to enter their system in whatever capacity. But they said, if you enter our system, it's our system. Good luck, see if you can manage to do it. And then women entered the system, and some women, and interestingly enough, mostly the women who kind of are like men, seem to be happy and operate in this system very well. But then, there are other women, and of course there are also other men that are not in this alpha, this tough, can't really assert themselves like that. So what happens to all of those? So those are the ones that are being judged, those are the ones that are having a really hard time, and those are the ones that are angry, and on both sides angry. So I said, well, it's a system. The system is broken. The system hasn't been upgraded. Every software, every computer, every bicycle, every screw, every paint on a house, everything has to be reapplied, upgraded at one point. The only thing we haven't upgraded is the system we are using at work. It's the same system. It's always been in place. So I say the system is broken, and the system is broken because we are missing the other half of the system. The other half of the system is the female component. So if we have the men's code on one side, then why don't we have the women's code on the other side? And we created in such a way that it has its own leadership attributes, it has its own adjectives, its own sort of path to success, which might be different than from the men. And we really identified as a male and a female component of the entire system. And bam, there you are. Now, men don't have to be mad at women for taking away, or tearing down their precious system. Women don't have to be upset at men for not letting them into what was only built for them, and both can be happy. Voila. So,
okay. Help me understand a little bit more. So when you say men's code, is that some official thing that I'm not aware of, or you mean the unspoken, like implicit, like system of business that has existed for a long time?
Yes, the latter. So the men's code that is in effect is an unwritten code. And it is something that has been in existence since the beginning of times. It is something that's being handed down by man to man. It is what fathers teach their sons. It is what's being taught in business. It's the way things are done. When you work here, this is the way it works. When you go to a place, this is the way it works. And it is now so embedded in the DNA that men don't even ever think about that some of the stuff that they're doing or saying is outdated. Hence we have this the travesty with the Me Too movement is because it literally I say this out loudly, and even though I might get crucified for this again, but men believe they have a right to do and say whatever they want to do whenever they feel like and pursue any woman they deem fit at any cost. And that in the end, women are just going to like it because men are so unbelievably awesome, which is, of course, absolute nonsense. So in this code, in this men's code, now that it's being under scrutiny, where they're being told that they cannot behave like this anymore, we're seeing the cracks in the crack in the men's code. And some men, and I believe you're one of them because you're very pro-women, we see men saying, well, we have wives, we have daughters, we have mothers, we have sisters, and actually, as a matter of fact, they should have the same rights. I totally get it. I might have to adjust, some of the stuff I used to say or what happens in the locker room. And then the women's code is really something that I founded, and I founded it specifically to give women their own code and to have an opportunity to explain to men that women don't want the men's code, the women have their own code.
And help me understand a little bit more. So let's continue along that line. So what are some of the things as you have, what I'm hearing really is that what you want to come up with is a human code, right? That's something that doesn't necessarily down the line have anything to do with gender, but in order to create that human code, we need to balance a lot of the elements that are maybe not helpful right now. So what are some of the elements maybe that are part of what you call the women code that can help us come up with a better human code?
Wonderful. And you're exactly right. The labeling of the male and the female is only necessary until we achieve the balance. Once we achieve the balance, we can remove male and female attributes and the labeling, and then you are absolutely right. Then it is just the code or the human code or the business code or whatever you want to call it. That's exactly the idea. And I'm kind of thrilled that you picked it up so quickly. So there's a couple of things to go into it. So on the women's side, number one, the women's code talks about women have to support other women, and young women have to support women who are older. And I find that there is a lot of negativity amongst women. And, there are women out there that said that doesn't exist. I'm sorry, that's bullshit. That is not true. There is a lot of rivalry and competition amongst women. And that is the first thing that needs to change. And I wrote a book about it called Happy Woman, Happy World. And that sort of was my my first step to saying we need to help other women, which is, what I'm doing. I'm here, I'm sharing the knowledge. I'm not afraid of other women becoming hopefully way more successful than I am, just to give the knowledge and pass on the knowledge. That's the second part, is share the information. So don't withhold, don't step back, but just just go ahead and have, and really be a woman who collaborates with other women. Another component of this, and men actually will like this very much, is to make a differentiation between what we take to women and what we take to men, because men are not our girlfriends. I do believe that there has been an issue with undermining masculinity and what that means, and that a lot of women, because they can't handle other women, make their men their girlfriends. I don't think that works either. I do believe if we get along with women, we need to decide, is this an emotional issue? Let's take the emotional issues to women, and and let men shine in what they're really good at. And that, oftentimes is the, more strategic and more logical component. A lot of men, I'm not saying all men, but a lot of men, when it comes to emotions, that's not really their super skill. So it's about deciding, how do I want to show up, and what do I need, and where's my code? And then on the next level, it is about collaborating between men and women, where then it's like making men understand what women bring to the table, and as I said, elevating that and giving that its own validity and validation, and making men see that the 50% of the population, which are women, and women's attributes are just as important as masculinity and their attributes.
Yeah.
And taking it back to the women and saying, look, don't undermine masculinity in men and what they're bringing to the table, because both sides are important.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting you say that, because I didn't expect at all this interview to go this way, but let's keep talking about it, because I think it's really important. But I think, there is something there where there is a there's obviously a reaction to the abuse that's happened from some men in business, that has been a big backlash. But I do believe that part of the solution to that is actually not saying that men shouldn't be men, but men should be I think the more confident and strong that men are in their own masculinity, the better off they can be, and the more empathetic they can be. It seems counterintuitive. But I think that if men are strong, confident, and I pursue this in my own life. I practice martial arts, and I lift weights, but I also play music, and I embrace my feminine side as well. But I think that empowering both men and women to express the strongest version of themselves ultimately is what helps everybody grow, not the opposite. I think sometimes you see people kind of undercutting each other and saying oh, but men bad this, oh, but women bad this, as opposed to saying empowering each one of them to be their strongest self, which ultimately I think is how we get to that human code, right?
I think that is that's really the essence of everything, and I believe that that's how it ties back into entrepreneurship and into being a business owner, being into a leader. Is I reject the idea that we are looking for what people are flawed at and then force them to improve these components of themselves that we have now exposed. I do believe that we will be a much stronger and more productive leader, more productive society. We have stronger economies if we can go to people and say, what are you really good at? And let's make you the very best at the skill set that you bring to the table, and for everything else, outsource that, hire somebody, hire to your weaknesses, so that way you build the strongest team, that way you have the strongest impact. But, for some reason we have this finding faults and finding flaws, and then we have to put the finger in it and say, does it hurt? We do this in marketing, we do this with everything, so that people always are exposed at how that they have to feel guilty. And I think that's part of why this is playing into this so tightly. So what if we were to flip this and say, you have to be conscious, you have to be aware, you have to, really accept responsibility for who you are, but you are allowed and permitted and encouraged to be the best person you are in the areas that you're really good at.
Right, but I think the caveat to that is that people also have blind spots, right? So I think maybe one of the things that you probably have seen a lot of in coaching both men and women is some of the blind spots. What are some of the things you see for both men and women that are blind spots that as they develop their best selves can crop up without even noticing that because we have an audience that's pretty evenly split between males and females at Small Business War Stories, and it's mostly people who are either running a company or are interested in starting a company. So what are some of the things as people kind of come into their own power, blind spots for both men and women that they should think about along the way?
So the first thing, and I'm already laughing just thinking about this. So the first thing with men is that they just cannot understand that when they say something that's unclear to other people. So they just throw out the idea, and then they go like, get it, and they give no context, they give no explanation, they give no backstory, they don't say anything, they just bam, there it is in the middle of the room, and then everybody's supposed to say, wow, that's amazing. You go like, what are you talking about? Okay. So for men it really would be to establish that when you are presenting an idea, that you cannot assume that other people have gone through the same thought process or discovery as you have, and just sort of give them the context and then present your idea so everybody kind of can understand that. That probably would be my number one thing, which is, but it keeps me in business because I help people to actually design the language and the verbiage to really articulate it. When it comes to women, they sort of have a similar problem, but it manifests itself slightly differently, because what men don't explain, women over-explain. So I was just working with this phenomenal woman with this just incredible disruptor idea for the HR industry, and I said, explain the idea to me, and 15 minutes later, I still didn't understand what it was. So once we worked together, it took us, an hour to really fine-tune what that business model was and how to explain it. So women have a harder time to get to the point, but they kind of go more around it and explain the whole thing. So they start at 30,000 feet, but they never land. And so that would be, what I would tell women is to really be clear about who you're talking to, because it has to have both. Men have to have the context and then the bullet points, and women have plenty of context, but they need to pull out the bullet points out of the context.
Wow, that's some powerful stuff. Is this do people? So I've joined the forum. I think I want to say a couple of weeks ago. I haven't seen it. Do people talk about it? I mean, these are tough conversations to have online. I think that's part of the problem too. Is context and tone gets lost, right?
Yes, the forum on LinkedIn is a whole other story, because we have with the engagement, once you get so many people in there to get them really engaged, this is a whole other beast. But in the Women's Code, we say there's 3 elements you need: awareness, support, and collaboration. The first thing is always self-awareness. And I don't care who you are. I don't care how brilliant you think you are. I don't care if your IQ is off the chart, if you nailed everything with a 4.5 average. But it all comes down to one thing: you got to be aware of who you are and how you come across. This coming across, right? I think that the perception of how you see yourself and then how other people see you, that is probably the largest issue I see with business owners and leaders, and business owners are leaders, that we think we're that, and that is to your blind spots, Pablo, that we believe we show up like this, but we really don't. So the feedback of, am I really perceived the way I want to come across, is critical for you to be successful, period. And the work that you have to do once you see that there's a discrepancy, when you say something and nobody ever gets it, it's you. If you say something and nobody ever does it the way you want it to be done, it's you.
Yeah.
When you constantly say, well, so-and-so just doesn't understand where I'm coming from, it's you. So it really gets always back to us. Who are you going to want to be and how you want to show up, and then become that?
Yeah, and there's a lot there about personal responsibility and accountability. But also, I've had some background in the training that you describe. When I went to grad school, there was a course called Interpersonal Dynamics at Stanford called Touchy Feely, where I learned a lot about that specific type of feedback. But having done that work, it's really, really challenging work to do, and you have to be very willing to be vulnerable. And it's not pretty. The process of getting to know yourself better in that way is it can be painful. So what are some of the things that you suggest? I mean, and we are going to be wrapping up here in a few minutes. But before we sign off, I'd love to hear your thoughts. And what are some of the tools that you encourage people to use to increase that self-awareness?
Well, the first thing that and I work with Myers-Briggs. I'm a certified Myers-Briggs practitioner, and every client I work with, I put through the program because it's not just about self-awareness, but it also teaches you about other personality types. So I do believe that a personality assessment of some sort is required if you really want to be a good leader, because it gives you at least some sort of sense of self-awareness. The second thing I would recommend is have a detachment from the outcome, right? Or the results, because the results are what they are. It's just the facts. It's neither good or bad. We all here on a journey. Nobody was born perfect, or maybe we were all born perfect, and then we became imperfect, only to become perfect again. But I look at it, really with a curiosity, and that is, I think, the fun of development, where and especially on my YouTube channel, where people are in the anonymity of the comments, say some really horrible stuff. You have to be able to say, if that's coming to me, this is how I'm coming across. What do I need to change to come across differently, or can I handle to put that out and have that come back? So, the personal responsibility in my world is probably the number one thing that I would encourage anybody and everybody who's listening to your wonderful show to say, it's like, am I really taking full responsibility, or am I running around and I'm blaming, the world and the leadership and this and that on that, or am I really stepping up? Because for everybody who's not making it, somebody's making it. And for anybody who's not figuring it out, somebody does. So where are you going to stand?
Wow. That is tremendously, tremendously powerful stuff. I'll confess to you that this is in no way, shape, or form the way that I thought this podcast would go, but I think it's a really, really important conversation. And I've learned a lot by listening to some of the things that you're saying, so I really, really appreciate that.
Thank you very much. Yeah, no, I mean, I didn't prepare for this, because I looked at your shows and what you talk about and going, like, I'm just going to trust that he'll take me wherever we need to go.
Yeah, well, to be honest with you, it developed in a wonderfully surprising, thought-provoking direction, which is always great for everybody. So, before we sign off, where can people find you? What are some of your? So you have a coaching business, and you also have quite a few other things that you're involved in. Where can people find you if they're interested in getting in touch with you?
Yes, wonderful. So the first thing I would like to invite everybody who is listening to this, take my free Airtight Avatar training. You find it at airtightavatar.com. And it's a 45-minute training on how to find really good clients, very powerful little training. You can, of course, also find me on under my name, beatechelette.com. on the web, or the Women's Code. For those of you who are interested in the leadership component of things, that's at the Women's Code. I have YouTube and Twitter, but if you go to the website, you'll find it. And of course, my book, Happy Woman, Happy World, which is available on Amazon as an audio, ebook, and a printed version.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much, Beate. You've been extraordinarily insightful, and this is a great conversation that I hope we'll continue to have as we continue to grow as both people and as society.
Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure to speak to you.
Thank you. Thank you for listening to Small Business War Stories. If you enjoy the show, share it with a friend, or you can subscribe on iTunes, Stitcher, or on our blog at blog.proven.com. If you have an idea for us, we'd love to hear it. Please email us at podcast@proven.com. See you next time. Small Business War Stories. Small businesses are the soul of America. And this is where they tell their stories. I am your host, Pablo Fuentes.